Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Welcome to our listeners podcast. Today, we are absolutely excited because we're going to be talking about a really important topic, sometimes overlooked, but getting more and more important in today's world, especially with the growth and explosion of technology all around us. And the topic for today is going to be securing the edge, cybersecurity for OT assets. Now, before we dive into this topic, I must really welcome our guest today. He's a legend in smart building cybersecurity, Fred Gordy. Fred, we are honored and welcome to our listeners' podcast. To those who don't know, or who may not know, Fred is a renowned industry expert and thought leader with over 23 years of experience in secure control system development and implementation for Fortune 500 companies across the US and internationally. Fred is one of the pioneers in addressing inherent cybersecurity risks in building control systems, with over 100 published articles in outlets like the Wall Street Journal, CNBC, and key industry journals. Fred has been a tireless advocate for awareness, education, and action in OT cybersecurity. He's led workshops, trained professionals, developed assets methodologies based on ISA 62443 and CIS standards. Fred currently serves as a technical advisor to the Building Cybersecurity, ISA 99, ULTIA SPIRE, Smart Building Assessment, and is a CS2AI Senior Fellow. His deep knowledge and practical insights are going to make this episode a must listen for anyone working at the intersection of buildings, technology, and cybersecurity. So, with that, Fred, welcome to the podcast. Thank you for taking the time. We are truly delighted to have you here. So, Fred, why don't you kick it off by giving us an introduction and telling us all the stuff that I could not cover in what I could welcome you with?
I think you did a great job, and I'm very humbled and also honored, Emmanuel, to be joining you. I've followed your work for years. You've done a lot of things for our industry as well. And again, thank you for doing this. And the podcasts you've done so far have been top flight. I mean, I've watched them all. A couple of them I watched twice. Um, but very quick to give you a little background on myself. Currently, I serve as the national practice lead for building cybersecurity at Michael Baker International. Michael Baker is about a almost 5,000 member company. We primarily do work in the federal space. However, when I came on board, it was to do things non-federal. So my focus is cybersecurity for commercial data centers, healthcare, that type of thing. I've got about 25 years of experience doing building control systems, but I also come from another perspective. Although I don't call myself an IT guy anymore, I did start my career in IT, and that's kind of helped me understand the battle that we face, which is, I know you know very well, is this topic is one that I feel like in some ways it's been done to death in a way. But, and let me explain that. It's everybody's woken up to the fact, or well, not everybody, obviously, but a lot of people have woken up to the fact that they probably need to be addressing this. The thing is, though, it's very confusing. What do I do? Do I just get my IT staff to come in and just take over? Do I just suddenly close the door on everything? Well, you and I both know the serviceability of these systems is really their value, right? And so we've created, and I'm pointing at myself because I was an integrator for many years, is we created an environment of available systems. And what I mean by that is if you want to get to them, you can get to them. They're not like IT systems. They're also not like IT systems, and they were not designed to protect themselves. So that's kind of the perspective I come from.
Excellent. That is fantastic, Fred. Being able to talk to two sides of the coin, both from the IT side and the OT side, is a rare combination of skills. And I think that has really helped you to shape your career, your trajectory, and your thoughts on this space. So, with that, Fred, let's break down the problem the way we
Sure.
see it today. We have an explosion of people, with people coming in, we have an explosion of buildings. Now, to serve those buildings and the people in those buildings, we have an explosion of digital services.
Mhm.
To cater to these services, we now have a massive boom in data centers. The commonality between physical structures, be they data centers, buildings, university campuses, schools, hospitals, is the OT systems in those buildings. People know IT systems really well, but when we start looking around and asking that, guys, what is OT technology? What is operational technology? So to begin with, Fred, could you give us a simplified introduction on what OT technology is and why it is important?
Well, so if I can maybe step back just a couple of decades, when this technology started getting introduced, we had, whether it be a data center or hospital or whatever it was, you had a certain number of facility staff. Okay. Well, when these systems started coming in, it made things more automated. And therefore, companies saw an opportunity, let's just be honest, to downsize the number of people that needed to run the building. Well, so now what you have is, instead of, you used to be 10 guys per one building, there's 5 guys per 10 buildings. And so we've created that kind of situation where the people that are working on the systems are, I don't want to say that they don't understand what they're doing when it comes to
Mhm,
this stuff, but they have a daily task that they must do, and that's to keep
mhm,
those buildings, facilities running. Now, the moving to the technology. The technology, when I first got into it, was fairly closed. I mean, one manufacturer and another manufacturer didn't play well together. Well, the standards started getting opened up. BACnet came along, LAN. Well, Modbus has been around probably longer than that. But the whole thing was, let's make these interoperable. Let's connect these things, because when we connect them, we can actually get more benefit out of them. If I have my HVAC system running the schedule for everything in my building, well, that's going to make it run more efficiently if we have people counters and that kind of thing. But all of this requires openness, right? So these systems by design is, IT uses CIA, which is confidentiality is number one, integrity, availability. In our world, it flips it on the head, and availability is number one. All that is king. So these systems were designed with availability at the center point of how they are designed.
with the proliferation and growth of both technology and and people and the services that the people depend on, Fred, I think the
Mhm,
criticality of these systems go unreported or underserved. Now, Fred, in today's world, we've heard so much about IT security,
mhm,
right? And the moment we say IT security, we almost always think about security of applications, security of connectivity, security of services. But underlying it all, sometimes we fail to understand that, the spaces that we sit in, the infrastructure that we use, and when I say infrastructure, I refer to highly classified infrastructure as well, like our power plants, our utility plants, our hydroelectric plants, our airports. They function because of OT systems behind them
mhm.
that run and drive all of these systems working together. So why is it that we focus and talk so much about IT cybersecurity, but we don't give OT cybersecurity that same attention?
Hmm. That's a great question, and I like the way you phrased it, because I kind of get that ask in different, in split up, but together is the perfect way to ask it. So on the one hand, the reason everybody defaults to IT cybersecurity
Mhm,
is because that's what they know. I mean, that's what they've
mhm,
heard. Okay, well, if we want to make it secure, we got to go out and get this, that, and the other, that brand names, COTS or commercial off the shelf kind of stuff.
mhm,
So there's availability for that. The other side of it is, who cares if somebody can see my system? I mean, there is a little bit of well, not a little bit. There is a lot of apathy when it comes to that. That, you know, I like to. I like to parallel things. You've seen the things on the news where
Uh-huh.
some neighborhood gets shot up,
Uh-huh.
and you say, "Well, that's terrible, that's horrible," but it would never happen here. And then lo and behold, it happens here.
Uh-huh.
So it's it's a combination of a default reaction is to go to IT for help. The other is we really don't have a problem. And I'm telling you, Emmanuel, obviously I can't name names, but over the years, I've been involved with assessments with people that really should have been buttoned up, and they believe they were buttoned up.
Uh-huh.
One of my colleagues, for instance, this company kind of begrudgingly got, well, part of the company begrudgingly pushed IT into having us come in and do an assessment.
Uh-huh.
And they swore up and down that they spent millions and millions of dollars on their networks. Well, we were able to punch a hole in one thing, and we were able to see 1,000 devices across the United States
Wow.
at data centers, at uh, some of them were financial institutions.
Wow. Uh-huh.
So all it takes is one hole to get in. I mean, it's like a hole in a dam. I mean, that hole is going to eventually get bigger the more pressure that's put to it.
Uh-huh. No, that's interesting. I know, Fred, you bring up a very interesting point. The being engineers, being IT professionals, OT professionals now. When you talk about IT, IT was designed where anybody could write a program. The
Mhm,
whole app revolution. Hey, you have a mobile device, go ahead, build a game. And don't worry about the security, we'll take care of it. We'll host it on our marketplace, we'll secure it. And it is never, you don't have to be, all you have to do is have a little bit of creativity and
mhm,
an understanding of your customers' problems, and you can build amazing applications. And then as they start to scale and grow, you get experts coming in and you start to re-architect and you grow it. But OT systems, on the other hand, have always been built by companies that advertise themselves as engineering powerhouses,
mhm,
as folks that say that only we can build these systems and design these systems. Nobody else can do it better than us. So the premise for these systems to begin with is that we are the best at what we do. We create the most safest, secured engineering systems the world has ever seen, and we have been doing it for decades. Some have even been doing it for hundreds of years.
mhm.
Now, with the premise that has been so different, from your view, Fred, the on one side we have very secure IT products, even though where we say anybody can build applications, anybody can piece these things together, and on the
Mhm.
other side we have companies that advertise themselves for their engineering prowess, yet they have the most vulnerability when it comes to cybersecurity and when it comes to threats today. So, with that in mind, Fred, how would you categorize the way the threat landscape has changed over the decade as buildings have become more digitized? And you mentioned data centers. As data centers are growing up, no company comes and says, "Hey, you know what? Anybody can build a chiller.
Yeah.
All you need to do is put a fan there, and it'll cool it." No, they say, "Do you know how complex chiller design is? You know how complex airflow is, right? Do you know the various types of coolings we have to employ?" And now they're talking about immersion cooling. Now, with that, how is it the biggest and brightest engineering powerhouses of the century are not able to have security right at the front of all their discussions? And what have you observed and seen, Fred?
Well, I will say that on a positive note, um, I, I have some fairly close friends that work at some of the major manufacturers of systems, and they are making strides. They are trying to make these systems more secure. But let's be real about this part. And this is the
Mhm.
hardest thing for people, either for me to explain to them or for them to understand, is unlike an IT system, which runs on Windows, Linux, very,
Mhm.
there's cut and dry things that IT systems run on. Control systems have hundreds of operating systems.
Mhm.
I mean, and now not in the traditional sense. I know you know this, but I mean, when I say operating system, it's an embedded. It's, you've got Qnix, you got, I
Uh-huh.
could sit here and list all of them.
Uh-huh.
The manufacturers can only do so much, and
Uh-huh.
they are trying to, and they, like I say, some have done well. The problem is there's a huge amount of legacy stuff that's out there that now they're trying to integrate their new stuff into,
Uh-huh.
but then you have Swiss cheese over here that they
Uh-huh.
invented years ago. So
Right.
you have that working against them. The next thing you have is people. So again, going back to my integrator roots, is when you, let's say you were my customer, and you came to me and you said, I want to put in, and I'm not picking on any manufacturer, but a Johnson system or a Honeywell system, whatever. That's about all you told me. And, I would get sequences of operation. I'd know how to, you know, make the chiller plants work in
Uh-huh.
conjunction with the air handlers and cooling towers and all of that stuff. But you didn't give me any security parameters. The only thing you gave me was make it work. Well, that is a 30 to 40-year-old embedded mindset. So now you have people who, I got to tell this story on the boss of mine. I'll leave his name out, but I came to him and I had this really great idea and that we could do it for customers and everything. And
Uh-huh.
he looked at me and he said, who's going to pay for it? And I said, well, I mean, I think we should offer it. He said, has anybody asked you for it? And I said, well, no. And he says, we're not interested because an integrator, and this is not picking on integrators, but integrators are in the business to make money. And unless you give them the specifications, so this is going to my roots with BCS and IS 6443, is you as an asset owner are ultimately responsible. The manufacturer is not, the integrator is not, so you got to educate yourself on what it is that is acceptable risk for you, not just on your IT side, but on your OT side as well. And one
Uh-huh.
last thing I'll say is also taking consideration of what your OT system or how your OT system could impact your IT system, even if they're not connected.
Uh-huh.
I mean, data center is a perfect example. I'd take down the cooling and shut your data center down.
Uh-huh.
I
Wow.
hope that kind of answered your question. I know I kind of got
Yeah.
around a little bit.
So with your experience, right, with all the stuff that you've seen and okay, all the evolutions of these systems you've seen, what have been some of the most surprising or alarming security flaws you have found in building control systems or OT systems?
Well, the biggest number one, and this, when I say this, I know where everybody's brain's going to go.
Mhm.
Ransomware, 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 ransomware. Well, ransomware in the OT world is
Uh-huh.
100% avoidable. And people go, oh, you can't say that. Yes, I can, because of the incidences I have been involved in, 90% of them involved ransomware, and 100% of those were avoidable. What happened was the operator was using their building control system to check Facebook, to look at their email,
Uh-huh.
and they unleashed something on the control system. In one particular case, somebody opened email. It said the guy's, it was one of his, he thought it came from one of the guys he's working with, and it said, hey, here's some pictures we took at the lake this weekend. He clicked the link and it didn't go anywhere. Now
Uh-huh.
this is the really this is not this is the norm. From that, the guy when the other guy came through the room, he said, "Hey, your pictures, I didn't get them." He said, "What pictures?" And so then they both went, "Oh no, maybe we got a problem." They backed the system up with the virus on it. Had the integrator come out, bring a brand new machine, reinstall it. Well, guess what? They put the virus right back in. But anyway, so that's one thing. The other thing is
Uh-huh.
there's a term called living off the land, and that's an attack vector that bad guys use. OT systems present themselves as an open hole, and there's a lot of times that I can pivot off of your OT system. I may not want to do anything to your OT system,
Uh-huh.
and I've seen it to where they've actually, at some point down the road, somebody put a second network card in the head end, and connected it to the IT network. Well, IT allowed that second IP. They said, well, here's you an address, just put that in. And so
Mhm.
now I'm in the network. And as a result, these guys have been able to go in and steal passwords and steal, just information about the company. Um, the one of the most shocking, and I've got a picture of it. I've shown this before. I won't tell the name of the military base. I know this is military, but again, it's the integrator and the mindset is the military base was converting the HVAC system over to what they call the NIPRNet, which is a secure network.
Mhm.
When I got in there, there were two network cards in this one device, and there were two cables plugged into it.
Uh-huh.
And I said, "What is the second network cable for?" And the guy that was responsible for all the buildings on this base, he didn't react. The integrator said, well, we're running behind, so the guys back at the office are programming remotely. And I said, do you realize you've just bridged national security? You need to unplug that now. But the guy who ran the buildings didn't see that as a problem.
Mhm. Wow. The importance of skills, perceptions, and understanding as to what a threat profile should be and how you
Mhm.
should deal and manage it. I mean, listening to Fred, most of the time it's just that people don't understand or people don't know,
Exactly.
right? Until it's too late. So with that, Fred, you worked across the globe, right?
Mhm.
You work with companies in the US and you work with companies abroad. How does the approach to OT cybersecurity differ?
It doesn't. In
Uh-huh.
a lot of respects, I'll be honest with you. I mean, it was really the first time I went overseas to look at a system, I expected something a little bit different.
Uh-huh.
Um, the 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 integrators were the same, our main mindset. Now, I will say there were some countries that were a little bit more progressive, let's say, but I will say that the ones that were more progressive were much more progressive than the United States. But in general, the viewpoint of everybody is kind of roughly the same. It's that thing of, well, it's an OT system. Who cares? Who's gonna want to turn? Who's gonna want to go in and turn my lights off? Well, they do. And like you and I were talking before, is you can't you can't think like. Sorry, I'm getting kind of sideways because I got a lot going on in my head. Uh, I got three trains of thought. But anyway, one of the things that helped and served me well was a guy told me to think evil, do good. So whenever I address a system, I don't look at it like the average person does. I want to figure out how to kill it.
Uh-huh.
I want to figure out how to infiltrate it. Well,
Uh-huh.
everybody tends to go with, whatever they know. They're not thinking outside the box and everything. Bad guys are the laziest, most persistent people you will ever meet. They will try everything to get in the easy way. Okay, so I say all that to say this is um, the perception needs to end that these systems are not vulnerable. You have to accept the fact that these systems are vulnerable, and just like a flood, your house may never flood, but when it does, it's a major catastrophe. It's
Uh-huh.
not a little thing. If you run your car into a light post, big deal, and you got to go get it fixed. But if a flood comes through your house, you got to build a new house.
Mhm.
That's what this is. It's a flood, in my
Wow.
opinion.
Wow. Wow. And that's really interesting, Fred. So, Fred, now if we pivot a little bit to the roles and contributions you have done to the world of cybersecurity, you have you have contributed to frameworks like the UL-TIA Spire framework. You serve as an advisor to building cybersecurity. You're also a senior advisor to CS2AI. Now, with all these contributions that you've done, Fred, you clearly have been a thought leader in driving these discussions, in presenting these values and positioning forward. With your collaborations, how have these collaborations influenced the future of secure physical infrastructure?
So let's start with BCS or
Uh-huh.
buildingcybersecurity.org. Um, that's where I kind of more or less got really deep into this, and I had no idea what I was getting into when I started doing it. But what we did when we started this off was with the mindset of creating a building control system profile. And what I mean by that is, there's been IT cybersecurity standards like 853, and I mean, I can name that numbers and all
Hmm.
that, doesn't matter, that have been out there for years. There is ICS or industrial control system standards that have been for oil and gas and for um, power grids. But there really hasn't been a profile created that took into consideration the things that have to do with building control systems.
Hmm.
And when I say buildings, and I know you know this, is be sure that don't think about it just as a commercial building. It's a data center, it's a hospital, it's a bank, it's a whatever runs that building. There is uniqueness to that.
Hmm.
There's so working on these standards committees, one of the things that it really was majorly eye opening, I kind of alluded this to before, and I think it is actually influencing the industry, is understanding that everybody has a role, but not only do you have a role, but you got a responsibility. And those are clearly outlined in 62443. They're also outlined in 882 and all these others. It's like I remember somebody's when I was younger, I did something and then somebody said, well, you're not supposed to, you can't do that. And I said, well, I didn't know that. And they said, well,
Hmm.
ignorance is not an excuse. Well, ignorance is no longer an excuse anymore. You got personally liable CISOs or CEOs, are being held to accountable. And that transcends whether it's IT or OT. If something happens, and you didn't do your due diligence. So anyway, whether it be the BCS standard or Spire, and I love what Spire has done. They've broken it down simply, understandably, and given people an opportunity to look at it and say, well, okay, I don't have this, but if I do this, I can then get to this maturity level. And then if I do that, I can get to the next maturity level. And let's be real, Emmanuel,
Hmm.
nobody is ever going to be perfect.
Yep. Fred, that's a very interesting point. Nobody could ever be perfect, and I think the more aware we are of that, the more secure we can make ourselves because we are accepting the inherent flaws systems will have, and we are accepting that we have to be vigilant and we have to be watchful of these flaws. So from your side, Fred, what are the emerging risks or technology you are closely watching or monitoring in the OT cybersecurity space?
So obviously, AI. I mean, I don't think any of us really understand the implications. I mean, I don't think it's, you know, Terminator and Skynet's about to take over, but I mean, the reality is like, what is it, Worm GPT that was released a couple of years ago? It doesn't have the moral constriction that Chat GPT and some of these other ones do. And really, um, it has enabled people to write programs faster, right? Less effort, quicker to delivery, and all of that. So that's a concern. The other concern is what do we do with the brownfield? You know, and then lastly, where are the people coming from that are going to be able to make a difference? And you and I were talking about it before.
Yep.
It's got to be able to be scaled because
Hmm.
you and I can't, like you said earlier, we can't be everywhere at all the time. So there we've got a deficit of people
Hmm. Hmm.
that understand this and know how to do things and care, to be honest. And then also too, we've got a lot of brownfield out there that we got to take into consideration.
Nice, nice. Well said, Fred. Fred, as I was reading your introduction, one thing that really caught my attention was your publication of over 100 articles that you've done. So, with the 100 articles that you have published, Fred, what is your proudest moment in your mission to secure physical spaces?
Wow, man, you ask good questions. I don't know that I've ever thought of that.
Uh-huh.
I will say this. I don't know if it's considered my proudest moment. I mean, I did contribute to some Wall Street Journal stuff and CNBC and
Hmm.
things like that, but it's not my proudest, but it's my most concerning
Hmm.
is when one day I stumbled upon airfield lighting equipment. And I just that was just it was something I put on LinkedIn a couple of months ago, and I was a little nervous about putting it on there, but I made sure that I anonymized as much as I could. But oh, and from there, I figured out the same manufacturer also made what they call obstruction avoidance lighting. It's on the mountain, and if I turn it off and you're flying VFR, visual flight rules, you may run into the mountain. I got a fair amount of response to that, but I almost, like I said, I was a little nervous to do it, and because I didn't want to give anything away, but I also wanted to give awareness. That my wife was asking me, she said, "Well, because I told her, I said I found this stuff, and she said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And I said, "Well, if I feel like if I don't say anything and somebody hits a mountain, I'm gonna feel I'm not gonna feel good." So anyway, the point that I'm getting to, not my proudest, but I think it was the most impactful to me was almost, I don't want to say a lack of concern. It was a response I didn't quite expect. Does that make sense?
Wow. That is something, sometimes, Fred, the examples you've been giving, people don't realize how vulnerable we are
Hmm.
and how dependent we are on things that we take for granted, especially especially the airstrips, where you have so many lights, and each of them have such specific function.
Hmm.
Them not working is a serious disaster. It's not about it being fused, but people intentionally turning them off or turning them on at the most inappropriate periods of times could create catastrophic disasters.
Hmm.
But yet, we sit in that aeroplane looking out the window and saying, wow, the runway looks really beautiful, without even realizing, if those
Look at
lights
those
weren't
pretty
there.
lights. Where'd they go?
Yeah, what just happened? And the with that, Fred, the just looking at the information that you've shared and the passion that you have and the amount of time you have spent, what keeps you excited and motivated, Fred? What is that attraction? What is that quest? Or what is the mission that this is helping you fulfill personally? I wouldn't say I'm professionally, I'm sure you're great and you are great. Personally, how do you get the excitement and passion from what you do?
How can I not? I mean, I'll go back to when I first moved from IT to OT, and I remember I wrote a program and I was sitting in an aquarium, a big around here. Uh, and there was these huge boilers in there, and I'd written the program to do everything. And with my mouse click, I turned on I don't know how many thousand BTU boiler, and that thing took off like a jet engine. I got high that minute. I mean, it was like, oh my gosh, I could do this. Well, from there, that excitement, it just kind of has always hung with me. And then when I woke up one day and said, dang, we got a problem, it's like it did become my mission. And you know, I love working for Michael Baker, but I would be doing this regardless because I genuinely believe that awareness, people need to be aware to the fact that we have a problem, but we have a fix. We have a way to get around it, or not
Mhm,
around it, but a way to make it better. And if I can help somebody do that, I
mhm.
mean, I'm happy to talk to anybody anytime. Um,
Fantastic.
it's just I love what I do.
No, that is brilliant, Fred. Time flew by, just went so quickly. As we're coming up on time, Fred, if I down to the last question,
Sure.
if you could give one piece of advice to every physical infrastructure project today, what would that advice be?
It's three questions to ask yourself,
Hmm.
and I guarantee you, most people are not going to be able to answer these. Do you know what you have? Do you know how it's connected? And do you know who has access? Fundamentally, I don't care what standard you got, what you're trying to do, you got to know those things before you even get started. So please, anybody that's listening, be honest with yourself, be honest with your people, and answer those questions. That's fundamental.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Fred. It was a pleasure having you on the podcast to listen to your examples, your stories, and your passions as to why you love doing this and the impact you've been creating across this space. We're truly delighted that you could join us, and thank you once again for your wonderful insights.